This lesson addresses Learning Outcome 2, reading and viewing, and the assessment standard which requires learners to explore the key features of text and explain how they contribute to meaning, describe development of plot, subplot, conflict, character, and role of narrator. Describe how background and settings relate to character and/or theme.
I feel so sorry for Kessia. It's as if she's feeling rejected, just like Emmanuel, and that's not fair.
Ah, so the book has gotten you under its control.
Oh, give it up. Though I must admit, the book has got me hooked. It's as if I know the characters, and I understand how they feel.
Hi there, and welcome to our fourth lesson on reading novels. As we've already seen, when you are reading a good book, you start to feel as if you know the characters and you become involved in their lives. We've already met Emmanuel, the main character in Because Pula Means Rain. But in this lesson, we will look at some of the other characters that are in the novel. We'll also find out more about characters in general that you can apply to any piece of literature that you are studying. So, by the end of this lesson, you will be able to explain how characters are created, explain how setting relates to the story, write character sketches. But before we begin, let's just remind ourselves of the different ways that a writer can give us information about a character. We can find out about characters through physical descriptions, descriptions of thoughts, descriptions of behavior, a character's relationship to setting, and through other characters' reactions and words. In the novel that we are studying, Because Pula Means Rain, we must also remember that Emmanuel is a character, and he is the narrator, which means that often we see other characters in the novel through his eyes. In this lesson, we will meet Emmanuel's grandmother, his best friend Masejo, Mrs. Turner, Re Pitlo, Kisha, and Mercy. But first, let's start by meeting his grandmother.
My grandmother was standing against the hedge now, looking fierce. My grandmother is a small woman with her cheeks tight and wrinkled. She's not even as high as my shoulder, but she's made of iron.
What can we tell about Emmanuel's grandmother from this physical description of her? This description makes us realize that Emmanuel's grandmother is a tough woman. If it seems as if she's made of iron, we imagine that she doesn't let people get away with much around her. But at the same time, she also has a soft side, and she cares a lot for Emmanuel. Listen to this.
My grandmother has no mirrors in our house. Mirrors are for vain, silly women, she says. God looks on the heart. That's what the Bible teaches us. So when she puts on her church hat, she checks in the bronze Lord's Prayer plaque that the hat is straight. And at night, she closes the curtain before she lights the lamp so that my reflection will not haunt me from the darkness outside. She does all this even when she insists that I must wear a clean mended shirt so that I will look smart.
This extract shows how in her own way, the grandmother really cares for Emmanuel. She pretends that she doesn't need a mirror because she understands how hard it is for Emmanuel to see himself reflected. From this extract, we also realize that the grandmother is a religious person because she talks about what the Bible teaches us. She goes to church and has a Lord's Prayer plaque on the wall. I hope that from the extracts we've been looking at, you have realized how to look out for clues about characters in what you read. It's also important to remember that whatever conclusions you draw about a character, you must be able to support with extracts from the novel that you are reading. Let's take a look at another character, Masejo, to practice these skills. To understand Masejo, we must understand that she's no longer alive. She's one of the many people who have lost their lives on a dangerous stretch of road known as Kotsikona. While she was alive, Emmanuel and Masejo often used to sit on top of a big rock that overlooked Kotsikona. But Emmanuel doesn't like Kotsikona anymore, not since Masejo died there. Masejo was his one and only true friend, the one who saw him for what he was. Let's try to get a sense of what Masejo was like from this extract and what her relationship with Emmanuel was like.
Already she was giggling. It was a lovely sound when Masego giggled. Even now, if I close my eyes, I can hear the sound of her giggling, with the clanking of the goat bells like a mattress beneath. My poor lost Masego. Even after these 7 years have passed, I miss her still. She was the only one in the village who saw past the way I looked, who saw me from the inside, the way I saw myself. She was the only one. But I lost her. I lost her to the horror of Kotsikona one bright hot January morning when a new year had just begun.
From this extract, we already start to like Masego and realize how important she was to Emmanuel. But if you had to write a character sketch for Masego, you could also use this next extract to support your answer, because her behavior in this extract tells us a lot about her character.
Once back when I was 7 years old, some boys pulled my floppy hat off my head. They ran and crouched behind a rock a little distance away, waiting while I cried. The young boys eyed me over the top of the rock. So when is he going to melt? They shouted among themselves. How long will it take before he starts to melt? Maybe you are talking nonsense, Mpo. But Mpo stuck out his chin. I'm telling you, if Eliswafi does not wear his hat, he will melt into a big puddle, my uncle says. My uncle knows about such things. But then Masego came out from behind, with her dark skinny arms and a blouse that was too big for her 6-year-old body. She ripped the hat away from them, then punched the boy Mpo in the face so that blood ran down his dark brown chin. She came carrying the hat to me, angry and indignant. It's not fair, Emmanuel, she said, as she said so many times. It's not fair. Why must they do this?
From these extracts, what can you tell about Masego? What was Masego and Emmanuel's relationship like? From the first extract, we learn that Masego really seemed to understand Emmanuel. And from the second extract, it is obvious that although she was young and slight, Masego was a champion when it came to sticking up for Emmanuel. She was a good friend who could tell right from wrong, and she wasn't scared to let others know this. There's also another character that sees Emmanuel for who he is. Mrs. Turner ran a bookstore and became friends with Emmanuel. Unfortunately, her bookstore did not work out and she had to return to London. When she leaves, Emmanuel loses another friend, and he speaks often of wanting to fill an emptiness that he feels inside. Even though she no longer lives in Botswana, Mrs. Turner remains a character in the novel through the letters that she sends from London. It is her guidance through these letters that helps Emmanuel to do what he has to do to fill the emptiness he feels in his life. Mrs. Turner shows immense wisdom and kindness and is very different from many of the other adults Emmanuel has to deal with in the village. Think about this description of her behavior. What can you tell about her character from it?
Mrs. Turner found picture books to read to me when the customers were not in, pulling me up to sit on her lap while she read. Oh, Emmanuel, here's a funny story about a nightmare. Shall I read it to you? Maybe it will help you a little. Your grandmother says you often have nightmares. Mrs. Turner put her arm around me as she read. Her pink-white flesh was cool against me, and she wasn't afraid to touch me. Maybe because my color seemed more familiar to her than all the brown arms and brown faces of her customers.
Mrs. Turner really seems to understand how difficult life must be for Emmanuel. She seems so wise. Unlike other people in the village who don't understand Emmanuel's condition, Mrs. Turner treats Emmanuel as she would any other child. She shows kindness towards him by spending time with him and helping him deal with problems through books and stories. The reason that many people in the village behave so badly towards Emmanuel is because they don't understand his condition. In many ways, the village's ill treatment of someone who has albinism is similar to the way that some people treat others who are infected or affected by HIV/AIDS. The issue of ill treatment of people because of ignorance is one of the issues that the author raises in this book. The struggle between old and new belief systems is another, but we'll deal with that later. Now, let's meet Keisha. See what you can tell about her from this extract.
Keisha, with a red knitted scarf always wrapped around her throat, even in the summer heat. Her shoulders were always bent forward under her thick red scarf. No one took notice of her, except me. She never lifted her head to look at me though. not even when I stood beside the fence to speak to her.
The reason why Keisha is always so sad is because she doesn't feel as if she fits in. If you read the novel, you'll remember the kids at school called her Li.5, meaning she's not full Motswana because her father was a white man and her mother a Motswana. As a result of this teasing, all she wants is to go and join her father in Germany, in Dusseldorf. That's why she wears the scarf all the time, because he gave it to her. Because in Germany, it's cold. Here's another extract to tell us more about Keisha. In what ways is she similar to Emmanuel?
I wrote to my father. I told him that I can come now. Any day he sends me the ticket, I will be ready. Keisha had stroked the decorations of her red scarf. I don't want to be in this place anymore. I don't want to be here at CJSS where everybody hates me and won't speak to me just because I'm not a full Motswana.
Keisha is an interesting character because she, like Emmanuel, longs to be part of a social group. She doesn't want to sit on the sidelines anymore. It's important that we listen to her story too, because it helps us to think more deeply about Emmanuel. Another character that helps to develop our understanding of Emmanuel is Repitlo. He also has a story to tell, and in fact, his story is part of what helps Emmanuel to finally come to terms with himself. Here's an extract in which Emmanuel tells us about this character.
I know because Repitlo has told me the stories of how the village began. He told me as he sat there in the shade of his weathered hut, there in his old armchair that has lost all its colors. There on the very outer edges of the village in Ward 12, where only the poorest people and the outcasts and the refugees live.
From this extract, we know that Repitlo knows everything about the history of the village and how it came to be. Like Emmanuel, he's also an outcast. Firstly, because his aunt went mad, and most people say that he is old and crazy like his aunt was. And secondly, because his son Jackson is a grown man, but he still has the mind of a child. Again, we can see that the author has included characters in a novel to help us understand the many different kinds of discrimination that exist. There is one final character we must meet. Her name is Mercy. She also has difficulties to overcome in her life. Her mother dies of HIV/AIDS and her community turns against her. She too is an outcast, discriminated against for something she has no control over. Let's see how she reacts to Emmanuel the first time she meets him. Think about what this extract tells us about both Mercy and Emmanuel.
I put out my hand to help her up the steeper slope on my side of the riverbed. I put out my hand and she grasped it without hesitation. Without any hesitation, she put her soft brown hand into my pink-shaded palm as if there was no difficulty for her. Then she stood beside me and looked up at me under the green-leafed trees, just the way Masego used to look at me so many years ago it seemed. As if the alien pink of my skin and the ungainly features of my face beneath the floppy head meant nothing to her, as if she could see past them all.
I hope you noticed how both Mercy and Emmanuel both seem to appreciate having someone to make friends with who can see past all of the reasons why other people in the village struggle. You have now met all of the most important characters in the novel. When studying a novel, you will often be asked to write a character sketch based on a particular character. When writing a character sketch, you need to include information about the character's physical appearance, their behavior, their attitudes and values, and their interactions with others. You will get to try this out in today's task. Your task today is to develop a character sketch of Sindiso. Sindiso is Tabang's older brother. Tabang is one of the young boys who regularly tease Emmanuel. Sindiso wants Emmanuel to go to Gaborone with him to help him find his girlfriend Gracie. Sindiso believes that Emmanuel will bring him luck on this trip. Use the following lines from the novel to help you build your character sketch.
"Hey, Muna," he greeted me. He said it just the way his brother Tabang does, pushing out his lips and sounding like a cow before milking it. "Hey, Muna." "Dumela," I greeted him back, waiting and wondering.
"Hey, Muna. And how would you like to join me on a trip to Gabs? Sharp, man. I'm on my way, see? And I want some company. It's a long, long road, my man.
The August sun glinted on his sunglasses and on the earring he wore in his left ear.
Good luck and see you next time when we investigate Emmanuel's amazing story further.